Today we're going to be looking at the Aztec Empire. Specifically, we are going to be exploring how the Aztec Empire was created and the foundations of its success. I hope you enjoy this presentation by Diana and I. Before meeting their demise by Cortez and the Spanish conquistadors, the Aztec Empire spanned across central and southern Mexico. The Aztec Empire began in 1345. By the 1400s, they reached their peak and lasted until 1521 CE. Before we take a deeper dive into the Aztec Empire, we first need to look at the evolution of Aztec civilization. The term Aztec is translated to person of Aztlan. Aztlan is considered the origin place of the Aztec people. After emerging from the caves of Chicomotztoc, the Aztec people lived in a place called Aztlan. Aztlan, which is translated to place of the white heron, was an island surrounded by water and mist. Aztlan was home to 7 different tribes, all of which make up the Aztec people. Among scholars today, it is still debated whether Aztlan was a real place or a mythical homeland of these 7 tribes. Those who believe it to be a real place consider the location to be in the southwest of the United States. From Aztlan, there was a great migration that lasted throughout many generations as the tribes made their way to the Valley of Mexico. The 7 tribes who inhabited Aztlan were instructed by the command of their supreme god, Huitzilopochtli, to leave Aztlan and walk the earth. Each of the tribes left Aztlan at a different time, beginning in 820 CE. 302 years later, the last tribe, the Mexica, were instructed to leave Aztlan for the promised land of the Valley of Mexico. After the Great Migration from Aztlan, the 7 tribes began making their way to the Valley of Mexico. They started establishing altepetl, or city-states, on the shores surrounding Lake Texcoco. By 1318 CE, all of the tribes had arrived to the shores of Lake Texcoco. Each of the surrounding city-states had their own politics with a Tlatoani, a single noble ruler. Some city-states began creating alliances with each other through marriage. However, in contrast, others started conquering the land with the use of warfare. These alliances led to the expansion of power and land, which created a need for a single ruler over the coming empire. Lake Texcoco was surrounded by high mountain chains to the east, south, and west. These mountain chains created a guard around the Aztec civilization and protected it from the outer world. Sacred landscape held a high importance to the Aztecs. The land surrounding Lake Texcoco was considered sacred land because the sun rose to the east and set to the west, which are 2 of the 4 main points, north, south, east, and west. Surrounded by diverse topography, the Valley of Mexico had 5 interconnected lakes that covered a central basin and provided an abundance of natural resources. Rich with volcanic activity and a temperate climate, the soil around Lake Texcoco was rich with nutrients for agricultural production. The Valley of Mexico City. Tenochtitlan. Following a prophecy from Huitzilopochtli, their supreme god, the Aztecs made their way to a small island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. This island they called Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan was the capital of the Aztec Empire, and today is where modern Mexico City stands. At that time, Tenochtitlan was among the largest cities in the world, with approximately 200,000 inhabitants. The city of Tenochtitlan featured a grid system that was split into 4 quarters, with a temple at the center that honored the sun and the wind god. The city featured causeways that extended out of the four corners from the central temple to the surrounding shores. Now we're going to look at Aztec society, specifically social structure and class hierarchy. Aztec society was divided into 2 large groups. The first was the Pipiltin, and the second was the Masehualtin. The Pipiltin were the people in power who controlled civil, religious, military, and economic aspects of society. The Masehualtin received orders from the Pipiltin and made up the majority of the population. Aztec civilization featured a caste system, and within the 2 divisions, there were well-defined social layers. As you can see here in this image, it was very similar to the caste system of India. At the top, we had the emperor, which was a part of the Pipiltin. Second, we have the nobility and the priests, also a part of the Pipiltin. And then it moves down to the merchants, artisans, soldiers, farmers, fishers, women, and the slaves, who all made up the Masehualtin. Government. Administration in the capital and neighboring city-states. The emperor, who was at the top of the pyramid, like we saw on the last slide, acted as the supreme leader who gave orders to the nobility beneath him to execute his plan. The nobility was responsible for administering the city, which included collecting tribute from surrounding city-states, military affairs, and political obligations. With expansion, many of the surrounding city-states adopted Aztec rule and law and were required to pay tribute to the Aztec gods. Aztec economics came from a variety of different things. Today we are going to talk about specifically today we're going to talk about agriculture, modes of production, and long-distance trade. Here is an image of different aspects of Aztec economy. Here we have a marketplace where the laborers and artisans sold their goods. We have a chinapa, which we'll talk about later, where agriculture was produced. And then we have the canoes on our waterways that facilitated long-distance trade. Chinapas. These are really cool. Also known as a floating garden, a chinapa was the Aztecs' main form of agricultural production, as they made use of the reclaimed swampland of Lake Texcoco. Chinapas were rectangular strips of land 10 to 25 feet wide, which were divided by channels of water. To make a chinapa, the Aztecs would begin by driving wooden stakes into the lake bed. By weaving vines and branches around the stakes, they would create an underwater enclosure. Soil would then be dumped into the enclosure to create an artificially raised surface where they would grow their crops. Along the edges of the enclosures, trees were planted to provide additional strength to the construction of the chinapas. If we look at this picture, we can see here that the stakes go deep into the lake bed under the water. As you can see, they create enclosures all the way around. Then, on top of the raised basin was where the crops were grown. On the edges, you can see the trees, which were normally willow trees that acted like anchors for the chinapas. Modes of production: laborers and artisans. Depending on their class and social status, the Aztecs perform separate jobs. The majority of people worked in agriculture. However, there are also many skilled laborers and artisans. Some of the skilled labor include metalwork, carpentry, and stone cutting. Artisans produced featherworks, jewelry, sculptures, paintings, and weaved goods. Those items that we just talked about in the last slide were traded throughout the city-states as well as over long distances. The marketplace was where people congregated to trade goods and services one another in the city-state. Mostly the markets happened in Tenochtitlan, but some of the city-states also had weekly markets as well. Long-distance trade was an integral aspect of Aztec civilization. Tropical feathers, obsidian tools, jade, and cacao were a few of the many items that were traded over Mesoamerica. Now, Diana will take over and tell us about the religion and some of the gods, as well as give you a glimpse into the art and architecture of Aztec civilization.
So now we're going to move on to religion in the Aztec Empire. So according to the Aztecs, it had taken the gods about 5 tries to create the world. It is said that the attempts of creating the world were ruined because of the infighting among the gods. Once that the sun was dealt with, the world had to be recreated all over again. After its creation, Quetzalcoatl, the feather serpent god, created human beings. It is said that the humans were created far before Quetzalcoatl had arrived to Earth to create the humans. So he had to go all the way down to the underworld to gather all of the bones. So once he gathered the bones, it is said that he kind of tripped and the bones flew out of his hand and they all shattered into many different pieces. And that is sort of the representation of where humans come from, as in their different sizes and the different heights that every human is. And but it wasn't until he added his own blood that the humans came to life. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the myths and gods. So the first god is Ometecutli. This god is known as the primeval divine being of fertility and was known to represent both male and female. The meaning of his name was the native language of Nahuatl was two lord, or lord of duality. This god represented both male and female because of its factors of nature, with masculine and feminine sides, or light and dark, or chaos and order, and sometimes good and evil. In the story of the Aztec creation, this god was self-birth. Since it represented both male and female, it kind of played the both parts of the husband and the wife. And he gave birth to the other major gods, like Huitzilopochtli, Quetzalcoatl. So the second god is Quetzalcoatl. This god is known as the feather serpent, as you can see, or the god of light and wind. It is known as one of the most important gods of the Aztec gods. It is known as the son of Ometecutli, the one that we had previously talked about, and the creator of mankind and earth. Its name originates from the Nahuatl words Quetzal, meaning bird, and Cuatl, meaning serpent. So the next god is Huitzilopochtli, and it is also known as the hummingbird of the south, or god of sun and war. This god is the supreme deity of the Mexica people. The Tenochtitlan was the focal point of Huitzilopochtli worship. Compared to the previous gods, this is the only god that was not influenced by earlier Mesoamerican divine. Being the god of sun and war, this placed him as the main deity of Tenochtitlan. And we're going to talk about how, opposed to the other gods, he is one of the main worship gods and one of the main temples in Tenochtitlan. So the sacrifices were mainly done for survival. It is said that the sun god, Huitzilopochtli, was going through war between darkness and light. But if darkness would win, then the world would come to an end. So to keep the sun moving across the sky and preserve their lives, the Aztecs had to feed Huitzilopochtli with human hearts and blood. So as you can see, this is sort of a drawing that they would feed the heart and the blood to Huitzilopochtli, the god. And after they were done with the sacrifices, they would kind of just let the bodies tumble down the stairs of the temple. So there'd be kind of like a lot of bodies at the bottom. And each time they would make a sacrifice, they would again take the heart out and sort of offer it and give it to the god so he can grant them their desires. So the temples. The Aztec pyramids were highly influenced by other principles used in the earlier Mesoamerican civilizations. They used the grid system for building cities and constructing large temples in shape of a pyramid. So, you can see it's not a full pyramid, but it kind of depicts the same thing. And the name of the main temple in Tenochtitlan was Templo Mayor. And it was a stepped pyramid, which meant that it had 4 steps going up with several stairs in between to give the Aztecs access all the way to the top. And it had 2 shrines built on top, and it was the center of Tenochtitlan. So the Templo Mayor had 4 different levels and terraces. As you can see here, this picture kind of gives you an idea of what it kind of looks like. So it has the 4 different levels. It also had 2 sets of staircases, so these in the middle leading up each shrine. Oh, and it reached to the top of the platform. The temple was 180 feet tall and was topped with 1 very large platform. So this is the platform up here. And it had 2 shrines for 2 different Aztec gods. So the Aztec homes. Unlike the temples, Aztec homes were built with very different material. They were built by using wood logs and mud bricks. The floors were typically just dirt, but other times they used stone. The roof of the homes were made by putting together small sticks to cover the top of the home. And middle class had 2 rooms. So one room, the whole family, however many family members were in that household, they would sleep in one room. And then the other room, or the other half, would set aside specifically for worship. So they would have a mini shrine for their gods, and they would set a time during the day to worship that god. And the nobles' homes were a lot more prestigious. They were bigger. They had more rooms, and they had a lot more artwork and a lot more statues of the gods around their home because they could afford it. So now we're going to talk about stone sculptures. Stone sculptures were usually made from volcanic rock and other stone material, such as jade. These sculptures range from small to tall, and as tall as 10 feet. And the Aztec Empire carved many sculptures to represent and honor their gods. They were often very large and were placed in temples and public spaces. The sculptures were used as a form of communication with the gods they worshipped. So when carving out the sculptors would have the figures facing forward, as you can see, and they were very symmetrical. So the females, this is a female figure down here. The females were usually kneeling, as you can see she's kneeling and you can't really see her feet. The male figures would be sitting with their knees drawn upward, as you can see in that picture there. And then their arms would be kind of hovering their knees. The faces were given ageless faces, meaning that the sculpture gave them inlaid eyes and half-open mouths, as you can see. And this sort of gave them a lifelike look, so it made them look more human-like. And these features represented what the Aztecs saw as ideal beauty in females and ideal strength in men. So now we're going to go to terracotta and ceramic sculptures. The first kind of ceramic pottery were utility wares. They were created for everyday use, such as cooking material or storage material. When making these, the potter coiled ropes of clay, one on top of the other. So he kind of connected the two rolls of clay and connected them together. He pinched them so that they would be pressed together as one and smoothed it out with stone. Soon after, the potters began adding indentations and creating drawings. So, intellectual accomplishments. So, the Aztecs measure time with a very advanced triple calendar system. This calendar allowed movements of the celestial bodies, provided a comprehensive list of important religious festivals and sacred dates, and it gave each day a combination of a number and a name. Both days and periods of days were given their own gods. Every 52 days, when the calendars fall on the same time, it is known as significant and promising. So, astronomy. It is known that some of the Aztec cities were planned according to astrological alignments and were guided by astronomical observations. In the Aztec cosmology, the sun was an important part, which was presented in the center of the calendar. They believed that the sun had come into existence as a result of a god sacrificing himself for humanity, which that called for human sacrifices to the sun. The study of astronomy was associated with religious significance and strong moral code of behavior. So, mathematics. It is said that the Aztec number system is a vigesimal system, meaning that they use 20 as its base, unlike our numerical system where we use a decimal system. In the Aztec arithmetic, a dot is equal to 1, as you can see here, and a bar is equal to 5, and an equal sign is 10, so the two lines, and so on. So now for our closing activity. So the activity that we chose today was travel brochure of Tenochtitlan. So the first thing that you will do is get into a group of 3. So after you get into a group of 3, we will pass out a sheet of paper that looks like this, where you will have to fold between the lines that are shown here. So after you and your partners have folded it up, then you guys get to express yourselves with your own, with your own art and your own representation of Tenochtitlan. So you will begin to fill in the blanks of the brochure, so the name of the place right here, and then you're gonna add some fun things to do and fun places to be or to see, and then you will draw pictures like, I would like to go on vacation here because, and you can draw a picture of the Templo Mayor or the Aztec calendar or the many different statues. So and it would be a fun idea to kind of show people that have never been to Tenochtitlan, even though we've never been there, but you can kind of have an idea formed in your head to get others to go explore the amazing city of Tenochtitlan. Thank you.